In this video, I want to share 3 tips on how you can film your life more cinematically. And while there's a lot of things that goes into making a video or clip look cinematic, I find that these 3 are the ones that elevate my own videos the most, especially when I'm trying to capture my own life. The 3 tips are going to be contrast, depth, and action. But before we get to that, I want to show you something. This is the IRIX 65mm T1.5 Cine lens. And while this video is in collaboration with IRIX, there's 4 good reasons why I choose this lens when I want to capture my life more cinematically. The first one is that this is 65mm, which is a little bit tighter than what our eyes see, but I prefer that as I do prefer the tighter focal lengths, but it's still close enough that it gives the same perception as what a human eye would see. IRIX also has a 45mm, so if you're more to that, that's also an option. Second part is that this is a Cine lens. So while the Sony lens that I'm shooting on right now is very, very sharp for photography, that's not always what I want for my videos. And this lens is naturally just a little bit more soft in how it's sharp. And at the same time, this lens doesn't have any cinema lens characteristics, as you'll find in a lot of other cinema lenses. This is a very clean look, and it gives more of a perception of what real life just looks like. And the fourth thing is that this is a manual lens. And while you might think, oh, but if you're capturing your own life in a cinematic way, autofocus is going to be the best way forward. But for me, it's usually manual focus, because when I'm in front of the camera and trying to capture something that I'm doing, I don't know what my camera is focusing on. And more often than not, it's been focusing on the wrong things, or it starts hunting for focus or shifting focus all of a sudden. And it kind of just ruined the clip. And while I'm trying to capture something in the moment, most often I'm not trying to redo it afterwards. So setting my manual focus point to where I want it to focus is so much easier to do with a Cine lens rather than trying to manually focus a autofocal lens. That's not to say that you can't do it. You definitely can. And you can use whatever camera lens you want with these 3 techniques. It doesn't really matter, but that's why I prefer this one. So with that said, let's get into the 3 cinematic tips. When we are talking about contrast in this case, we're talking about shooting into the shadow. And unfortunately, I'm deciding to shoot this on a day where it is mega cloudy. So everything is basically acting as a big softbox. But what I would normally do is look down on the ground and see where my shadow is, and then place the camera on one side and the sun on another side, meaning that I would be shooting into the shadow of my face, for example, and get a lot more contrast. What I've tried to do in this exact scene right now is make my face stand up against the sky in the background, and thereby make my face or me stand out a little bit more from the environment. I'm not 100% convinced that that worked, but that was the intention behind this shot. So getting contrast in your scene basically just means shadows are good. If you're shooting directly with the light source that you have, everything will appear very flat and not look very natural as we are used to seeing it with our own eyes, because there are shadows and contrast everywhere. So to make your footage look more 3-dimensional and cinematic, that's one way to go about it. So the second thing is depth. And that's what we're doing right now. Obscuring the foreground and making it more blurry will make distance between your subject and just make your scene seem a lot more 3-dimensional. And another thing that I find is that you often have to find different perspectives that you would normally see when you are just looking with the human eye, which also just makes your scene more interesting. For example, I would rarely sit inside the forest looking out on people. So creating foreground, midground and background just makes your subject stand out a lot more and makes your scene a lot more interesting. The last one is action, and this one can have 2 meanings. The first thing would be just capture whatever is happening. So if I came walking up here and I was just kind of standing here looking at this weird bridge in the forest, that could be just capturing the moment, more in like a documentary style, if you will. Doesn't really work here because I'm talking to you on the camera, but you get the meaning. Now, the second thing would be if I just turned around and spoke to you from a different angle. And what I mean by this is filming the same thing in multiple sequences from different angles. So you'll have to play out the scene multiple times from different angles. And that'll make it a lot easier to blend it together seamlessly in post and create that feeling that you had multiple cameras set up and you were capturing from different angles. But another thing that you can do if you want to do it more documentary style is just to move the camera every time something new happens. So that was the 3 tips on how you can film your life more cinematically. Contrast, depth, and action. Now, I've tried my best throughout this video to show you what I meant by actually doing it while I was talking about the individual tip. But of course, you haven't seen me actually capture my life cinematically in that way. So I hope it still made sense for you in this way and talking about it in this way. And hopefully I've showed you a few examples throughout the video that shows you what I've done in the past to capture my life cinematically. But this is genuinely how I go about it. And I feel like these are the most important parts to make it a story, to make it look visually pleasing. And that's also why movies from Hollywood or high-end productions stand out so much, because they're shaping the scene with lighting, with depth, and all those things to make the video seem less flat and more three-dimensional. Now, if this all seems a bit overwhelming or you are in bad luck with the lighting like I am today, where everything is just a big cloud, and while that sometimes is good for some things, it wasn't the best for the example today, what I'm trying to say is just a final bonus tip. Throw those tips out the window if they doesn't work for you on the day. These are all things in your toolbox that you can bring forward to try and make things look better, to try and capture them in a different way, get a different perspective, and make your videos generally just look more interesting. So it's not a guideline or rule book, just try it out and see if it works for you. And lastly, I want to say thank you to IRIX again for letting me have this lens and try it out. And it was so much fun using it for this video as well. Sometimes I tend to put it in the backpack for a little while because sometimes autofocus is just a bit easier, especially when I'm in front of the camera. But always when I take it out and I look at the footage afterwards, I wish I had it on my camera all the time. I hope that you could see throughout this video what I meant as well. So if you have any questions or comments, leave them down below and I'm happy to help and answer. And other than that, I'll just see you in the next video, I hope. And until then, take care.